Hey all! In this video, I'm going to show you how to level up your hardwood cutting board by adding an epoxy inlay to your engravings. We'll also be discussing the best finishing process for a quality, long-lasting project. So let's get started. Start by adding a sanding sealer, like shellac, to the area you're going to be engraving. Next, you want to do a deep engrave. I like to have about 1/8 of an inch depth, which might require several passes. This is important so you don't accidentally sand the inlay off later. I wipe this down with a little isopropyl alcohol first, but you don't have to. Add another coat of the sealer. Concentrate in the engraving and the surrounding area. This will help prevent bleeding from the epoxy into any of the open grains, and it will reduce bubbles being released into the epoxy. Let this completely dry. The longer the better. Place your board on risers and check for level. Choosing the right epoxy for the project is also important. You'll want to find a food-safe epoxy. Tabletop is fine, however it does set in 30 minutes. If your design is a little complicated, then you might want something that has a longer pot life. I'm using Maker Epoxy by Total Boat. This has about a 1-hour pot life, so I don't have to feel rushed to get it finished. Pour slowly in the center of the engraving and let the epoxy spread out on its own. It's okay to get some of the epoxy outside of the engraving, but you can also be a little strategic when pouring. I ended up using about 40 grams for this whole design. Epoxy will shrink as it cures, so be sure to overfill so it's slightly mounded. You don't want your inlay to be concave once it's dry. Better to overfill than underfill. This design has a lot of tiny details, so I like to use a silicone brush or even a toothpick to push the epoxy into these areas. Moving the epoxy around also helps to release any trapped bubbles. Now use a butane torch and quickly pass over the epoxy to help pop any surface bubbles. Be sure the torch is always being moved so you don't overheat the epoxy. Let this set for at least 2 days, longer in cooler areas that's less than 68 degrees. Now it's time to sand. Be sure to wear a good quality mask so not to breathe in the epoxy dust particles. Start with 60 or 80 grit paper and sand close to level with the wood surface. This took me less than 5 minutes. Do a quick pass of the entire surface to keep everything level. Then change to 120 grit and sand until all the excess is gone and only the design is left. Finally, sand everything smooth with 220 grit paper. You want to really clean all the dust off. First I hit it with an air compressor, then I wiped it down with isopropyl alcohol. To create a long-lasting quality board, you have to condition the wood. I start with an all-natural hydrating wood serum. This one has fractionated coconut oil instead of petroleum-based mineral oil. You'll need to shake it well to mix. Then pour directly on your board. you almost want to massage it into the wood. We want this dry wood to really soak up the oils. This is going to help prevent cracking over time and usage. I'll typically let it soak for at least 30 minutes to an hour before wiping off. Once this is dry, add a conditioning wax. Use generous amounts and apply in small circles. This will really seal the hydrating serum and oils in. Let this set up for a little while and then buff out with a clean rag. I give out samples of this conditioner set with each large board we make. We also include care instructions printed on a blank index card. Be sure to explain that all cutting should be done on the blank back side and not on the epoxy inlay. And that's it. Be sure to comment below with any questions. We'll see you next time.